Hello everyone! Tonight we travel deep into the icy wilderness of Canada, to a place where silence and mystery still linger. This is the story of one of the most baffling disappearances in modern history, a chilling event where an entire village seemed to vanish into thin air. This is the mystery of the vanishing village of Anjikuni Lake. The year was 1930. The region of Nunavut, in Canada's vast and unforgiving north, was home to small Inuit communities. Life here was harsh and demanding, with temperatures often plunging far below freezing. The people lived off hunting, fishing, and close-knit cooperation, surviving in one of the most extreme climates on Earth. One cold November day, a fur trapper named Joe Labelle was making his way through the snow-covered wilderness. He was experienced and traveled in the Northern Territories, and he knew many of the Inuit villages scattered across the land. Joe had often visited a particular settlement near Anjikuni Lake, where he found shelter, warmth, and companionship among the villagers. On this day, as he trudged toward the familiar community, he expected to be greeted by barking sled dogs, the smell of cooking fires, and the sound of voices carrying through the cold air. But instead, he was met with an eerie silence. When Joe entered the village, he was struck by the stillness. Not a single person was in sight. The cluster of igloos stood quietly under the pale winter sun, untouched by human movement. He called out, expecting someone to answer, but his voice echoed back without reply. He moved through the village cautiously, confusion slowly turning into dread. Inside the igloos, Joe found meals left half prepared, as if the families had stepped away only moments before. Fish and meat still hung from drying racks, tools and weapons lay neatly in place, and clothing was left behind. Everything suggested that the villagers had intended to return, but they never did. More disturbing was what Joe found next. The village sled dogs, usually so vital for survival, were discovered starved to death and still tied up. Their bodies were frozen in the snow, a haunting testament to how suddenly the people had vanished. No one who cared for them would have left them to die this way. Joe's fear deepened when he walked to the edge of the village and found the burial grounds. To his horror, some of the graves appeared to have been disturbed. Stones and markers were overturned, and the graves themselves looked as though they had been opened. Even more chilling, the bodies were missing. Panicked, Joe hurried to the nearest telegraph office and reported his discovery to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The RCMP launched an official investigation, sending officers to Anjikuni Lake to verify Joe's claims. When they arrived, they too found the village abandoned, with no sign of a struggle, no tracks leading away, and no explanation for where the people had gone. Reports from the RCMP at the time described the scene as baffling. The villagers' personal belongings were untouched, valuable tools and weapons remained in place, and nothing suggested robbery or conflict. The people seemed to have simply disappeared, leaving everything behind. Over the years, the story of the vanishing village of Anjikuni Lake spread widely, capturing the imagination of researchers, journalists, and mystery enthusiasts. Some dismissed it as legend or exaggeration, while others believed it was evidence of something truly extraordinary. One of the most puzzling aspects was the absence of tracks. In a snowy environment, any group of people leaving the village should have left a trail. Yet, according to reports, there were none. It was as though the entire community had been lifted away. Theories began to emerge, each stranger than the last. Some suggested that the villagers were victims of an enemy attack, perhaps by another tribe. But the absence of violence, looting, or evidence of conflict made this unlikely. Others speculated that the community had decided to migrate suddenly, abandoning their homes. But why leave behind their sled dogs, food, and tools, the very things necessary for survival in the harsh Arctic? Another theory delved into the supernatural. Some claimed the villagers were victims of a mass abduction by otherworldly forces, taken aboard alien spacecraft and spirited away into the sky. This idea gained popularity among UFO enthusiasts in the mid-20th century, who pointed to the missing graves and the complete absence of tracks as signs of something beyond human explanation. There were also whispers of cursed lands and spirits. Inuit folklore contains stories of malevolent entities that wander the frozen wilderness. Some believed that the people of Anjikuni Lake had been taken by these spirits, swallowed into another realm. Skeptics, of course, argue that the entire story may be exaggerated or even fabricated. Some historians claim there is little hard evidence that the Anjikuni disappearance occurred at all. They argue that newspapers of the 1930s often sensationalized stories to capture readers' attention, and the tale of a vanishing village may have been embellished or distorted. However, the involvement of the RCMP in early reports adds weight to the idea that something unusual did happen. Regardless of the truth, the legend of the Anjikuni Lake disappearance remains powerful. It taps into our deepest fears, the idea that an entire community could vanish without a trace, leaving behind silence and unanswered questions. The disappearance at Anjikuni Lake is more than just a story of people vanishing. It's a riddle with too many unanswered questions wrapped in the cold silence of the Arctic. In Part 1, we followed Joe Labelle's horrifying discovery of an empty Inuit village, meals left unfinished, sled dogs starved, and graves emptied. Now, let us dig deeper into the theories and possibilities that surround this chilling mystery. When the Royal Canadian Mounted Police arrived to investigate, their findings mirrored Joe Labelle's testimony. They saw the abandoned igloos, untouched belongings, and the silent graves. But the strangest thing was what they didn't find: tracks. The snow should have preserved footprints, sled trails, or some sign of where the villagers had gone. But there was nothing. The investigators were left staring at a blank canvas with no leads to follow. So what could explain this? One of the first theories is that the villagers chose to leave suddenly. Harsh conditions, dwindling resources, or fear of some looming danger might have forced them to abandon their homes. Yet this theory quickly falters. Why would they leave their dogs tied up to die? Why would they abandon food and tools, the very things that ensured their survival? No experienced Inuit community would make such a reckless decision. Another theory points to disease. Epidemics were not unknown in remote communities. If a sudden outbreak swept through the village, perhaps the survivors fled in panic. But again, the lack of tracks raises doubts, and no bodies were ever discovered nearby. The graves disturbed at the burial site also don't align with a disease explanation. Some researchers considered the possibility of a natural disaster. Could a sudden snowstorm, blizzard, or ice collapse have forced the villagers to scatter and perish elsewhere? Yet the evidence contradicts this. There were no signs of destruction, and the igloos remained intact. The village looked abandoned, not destroyed. Then there is the theory of hostile attack. Perhaps another group attacked the community, forcing them away. However, no signs of struggle or violence were found. The belongings, weapons, and food were left untouched. Invaders would have looted the village or left evidence of conflict, yet none was discovered. This brings us to the most unsettling theories. Some believe the villagers were victims of something not of this world. The complete disappearance, lack of tracks, and opened graves suggest an unnatural force at work. UFO enthusiasts argue that the villagers were abducted by extraterrestrials, taken aboard spacecraft in a mass disappearance. The graves, they suggest, may have been disturbed during the same event, as if the abductors sought more than just the living. Others point toward the supernatural. Inuit legends tell of malevolent spirits and beings that roam the Arctic wilderness. One such figure is the Tornit, described as a race of shadowy, otherworldly creatures. Could the people of Anjikuni Lake have fallen victim to a spiritual or otherworldly attack, vanishing into another realm beyond human comprehension? As the story spread through newspapers and radio, it took on a life of its own. Writers embellished the details, adding strange lights in the sky and eerie sounds at night. Some versions claimed that the RCMP found a massive, glowing light hovering above the lake, linking the mystery directly to UFO. These details, while captivating, are not confirmed in the original reports. But they show how quickly fact and legend merged in the public imagination. Skeptics, meanwhile, argue that the entire event may be a fabrication or exaggeration. They note that while the RCMP was said to have investigated, no official report has been found in their archives. Some believe that Joe Labelle's account may have been sensationalized by the press, turning a smaller incident, perhaps a migration, into a grand unsolved mystery. Yet, even skeptics cannot deny that the story has endured. Something about the vanishing village resonates deeply with our fears of the unknown. Entire communities do not simply vanish without explanation. If the story were mere fiction, it would not have lingered for nearly a century, retold again and again. Modern researchers have tried to retrace the story, seeking evidence in old archives, indigenous oral traditions, and historical records. Some Inuit elders recall tales of communities that moved suddenly due to shifting hunting patterns or environmental changes. But none match the eerie details described at Anjikuni Lake. The missing graves remain a particularly disturbing element, one that resists easy explanation. The Anjikuni mystery also sits alongside other stories of mass vanishings in history. The lost colony of Roanoke in North America, where settlers vanished in the 16th century, leaving only the word Croatoan carved into a tree. The crew of the Mary Celeste, a ship discovered drifting in the Atlantic in 1872 with no one aboard, meals left uneaten. These stories share a haunting similarity. Ordinary life interrupted, people gone without a trace, mysteries left behind. For some, the Anjikuni disappearance is proof that our world still hides forces beyond our understanding. Whether alien or spiritual, the event serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile our existence can be against powers we cannot control. For others, it is a cautionary tale about how stories evolve. Perhaps a small disappearance or relocation was exaggerated into legend, showing how human imagination can turn mystery into myth. But whichever side you believe, one thing is certain. The story endures because it taps into something universal. The fear of disappearance, the terror of silence, the dread of finding a place once filled with life reduced to emptiness. Today, Anjikuni Lake remains a lonely, remote place. The wilderness has swallowed any traces that may have once offered answers. Visitors who pass through the area speak of its silence, its frozen beauty, and the lingering sense of mystery. Whether the vanishing village was fact, fiction, or something in between, the story has become part of the Arctic's folklore, an unsolved enigma that continues to intrigue and terrify. And so, we are left with the image of a silent village beneath the northern lights. Igloos standing empty, fires extinguished, sled dogs frozen in the snow, and graves left open to the wind. A community erased, leaving only questions in its place. The mystery of the vanishing village of Anjikuni Lake remains unsolved. A story that refuses to fade, echoing across time as one of the coldest and most haunting disappearances in history.